Step away from that server." The CEO's voice rang sharp and clear. Everyone turned to look. The janitor, just a quiet single dad finishing his shift, had pressed a button that instantly stopped the beeping red error on the system. She glared at him. "Who do you think you are?" He didn't argue. He simply rolled up his sleeve. And when she saw what was branded on his forearm, her face changed. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. Marcus Avery didn't want to be noticed. At least not at work. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Janitorial night shift at Edgefear Innovations, one of the country's top tech development firms. He showed up early, clocked out late, and never spoke more than necessary. It was around 8:15 p.m. when the emergency alarm started flashing on the 5th floor server room. The system had glitched again. This wasn't the first time, but this time, the IT staff was out for a scheduled upgrade meeting across town. Marcus had been mopping near the glass doors when he saw two junior developers pacing back and forth inside, nearly frantic. One of them, Carla, was on the verge of tears. "The firewall's crashing. The files are backing into themselves. If this goes on for even 3 more minutes, we lose the entire week's data," she whispered, clutching her tablet. The other guy, Tyler, was tapping furiously on a keyboard. "The backup protocol's not responding. I've never even seen this interface before. It's not in the manual." Marcus stood still, watching. Calm. Focused. He didn't ask. He just stepped inside. "Hey, this area is restricted," Tyler said, panicked. Marcus ignored him. He walked straight to the blinking console, eyes scanning it like he was reading a language no one else could. He reached out and tapped 3 keys, paused, then clicked a small button under the panel. The screen turned green. Everything returned to normal. Carla stared at him like she'd just seen someone pull off a miracle. How did you?" But before he could answer, the glass doors swung open behind them. Madeline Chase, the company's CEO, stood at the entrance. She had been alerted the moment the system triggered the warning. Everyone in the room tensed. Her eyes locked onto Marcus. "What is he doing in here?" she asked, voice sharp. "He just fixed it," Carla said quietly. Madeline looked at Marcus with disbelief and annoyance. "You fixed our servers." Marcus nodded once, calmly. It was going to cascade. Someone had to stop it. She stepped forward, eyeing him like he was a problem she hadn't been warned about. "You're a janitor, not a tech. You don't touch our servers." There was no anger in Marcus. No challenge. Just quiet strength. He reached down, rolled up the sleeve of his worn shirt. And there it was, an old but clear Navy aviation technician's emblem, inked on his forearm. Beneath it, the coordinates of a Naudi-commissioned military base. The air shifted in the room. Tyler's jaw dropped. Carla's eyes widened. Madeline blinked. She wasn't expecting that. "I designed aircraft telemetry systems," Marcus said quietly. "Most of your software is based on patterns I used to fix while flying in the dark over enemy waters. This system, it's just faster buttons. Same core." Silence. Then a small, humble voice broke it. "Thank you," Carla whispered. Marcus nodded and picked up his mop. Madeline just stood there, not saying a word as he walked past her. But that moment, that was the beginning of everything changing. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the building just like he always did. Early, unnoticed, blending in with the hum of vending machines and the muted voices of half-awake employees. But something was different. When he swiped his ID at the security gate, the guard, normally indifferent, stood and gave a respectful nod. "Morning, sir." "Sir?" Marcus didn't react, just gave a quiet, "Good morning," and moved on. Upstairs, whispers followed him down the hallway like soft wind trails. Carla and Tyler were in the break room, pretending not to stare. Their eyes flicked to his forearm every time he passed. But he wasn't there for recognition. He was there to work. He pushed his mop forward, swiped the cleaning cloth from the utility cart, and kept his head down. That changed when the elevator doors opened. Madeline Chase stepped out, polished, focused, unreadable. Her eyes scanned the floor, landed on Marcus. Her voice was calm, collected. "You, in my office." He didn't respond right away. He just leaned the mop against the wall, wiped his hands on his shirt, and followed her silently. Inside her office, the tension was thick. "I don't know who you really are," she said slowly, "but what you did last night was unexpected." Marcus stayed silent. She opened a folder on her desk. I had HR pull your resume. It's empty. No college degree. No certifications. Not even a real employment history before 3 years ago. He didn't flinch. I also had a military contact check your tattoo. It's real. Verified. But the details are redacted. Still, Marcus said nothing. Madeline sat back in her chair. Why are you working here as a janitor? He looked at her, finally speaking. His voice was low, steady. Because I wanted to be close to my daughter. She's 7, and this job lets me walk her to school every morning. There was no apology in his voice. Just truth. Something flickered in Madeline's expression, almost like discomfort. She looked down at her hands for a second, then said, You should have come forward with your background. I didn't want anything, he said. Just a stable life. A quiet one. Madeline tapped her fingers on the desk. This company doesn't reward silence. But I'm not going to ignore what you did. That server failure would have cost us 6 days of data and about $300,000 in lost deals. She stood. I'm offering you a different position. Temporary. Technical assistant. Just a test. Report to the systems director at 10 a.m. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't look grateful or surprised. I'll think about it, he said. Madeline raised a brow. Most people would jump at the chance. He looked her in the eye, calm as ever. I'm not most people. As he walked out, Carla passed him in the hallway and whispered, That was you she called in? He nodded once. Good, she said. About time someone shut her down a little. Marcus didn't answer, but as he walked away, she noticed the tiniest grin at the corner of his mouth. At exactly 10 a.m., Marcus stepped into the systems lab. Not because he was eager, but because he believed in discipline. Years in aviation tech didn't just train your hands, they trained your habits. The lab was buzzing with tension. Monitors hummed. Screens flickered with streams of data. Engineers tapped away, some eyeing him curiously, others outright whispering. One of them, Brent, looked at Marcus with a smirk that barely masked his disdain. Guess HR's hiring janitors for tech roles now, he muttered under his breath. Marcus said nothing. The systems director, an older man named Robert Ingram with thick glasses and a nervous way of speaking, approached. You must be Marcus Avery. Madeline said you'd join us temporarily. Marcus extended his hand. Just here to help. Robert shook it, eyeing him cautiously. Well, we've been working on an internal interface for our new encryption model. There's a bug in the data stream. Keeps crashing the output after 127 seconds. We've been trying to isolate the flaw for 3 days. Marcus nodded once. Let me take a look. Robert hesitated. It's a complex interface. We're not expecting miracles. I don't do miracles, Marcus said, pulling up a rolling chair. Just logic. He sat down, cracked his knuckles quietly, and began working. He didn't use a mouse. He used keystrokes. Fast, fluid, intuitive. At first, people ignored him. After 10 minutes, they started drifting closer. He traced the crash not to the core algorithm, as the team had assumed, but to a compression loop that hadn't been rewritten since a legacy patch from 2 years ago. It wasn't just outdated, it was fundamentally flawed. It wasn't breaking because of volume. It was breaking because of time-based memory overflow. Your timeout parameter is recursive, Marcus said, voice steady. Brent leaned over his shoulder. That's not possible. We isolated. Marcus cut him off. Isolated the wrong line. Look at this. He highlighted a loop of code and restructured it in 2 strokes. The simulation ran again. 135 seconds. 150. 200. No crash. The room fell silent. Robert blinked. That shouldn't have worked. Because you assumed the problem was at the surface, Marcus said, standing up. But you're patching cracks. I just realigned the foundation. Brent muttered. You got lucky. No, Carla said from behind them. She'd been watching the whole time. That wasn't luck. That was precision. Madeline stepped in just then, her heels quiet on the polished floor. She had been watching, too, from the lab window. I've seen enough, she said. Everyone turned. Madeline looked at Marcus, unreadable. You're no janitor. Not really. Marcus didn't gloat, didn't nod. He just said, I never needed a title to solve problems. She took a breath, as if weighing something heavy. I'm giving you a contract. 30 days. Full clearance. Prove you can do more than just fix problems. Prove you can lead. Marcus's eyes didn't widen. He didn't flinch. But for the first time, something in his voice hinted at meaning. I don't want to lead, he said slowly, but I'll protect your systems, just like I protected people. The room was still. And then, unexpectedly, Madeline's expression softened. Just out of curiosity, why didn't you ever tell anyone what you used to do? Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Because some people only see what's on the uniform, he said, not what's underneath it. He turned and walked out, not waiting for her reply. But behind him, Madeline stood still, staring at the chair he'd just vacated, like she'd seen something she couldn't explain, something she hadn't expected to respect. And respect, for Madeline Chase, was rare. Madeline Chase didn't sleep well that night. She was used to late nights filled with numbers, projections, investor calls, or press briefings. But that night, her mind circled one thing: a man who quietly cleaned her floors for months, who had just solved a high-level encryption crash in under 10 minutes, and walked away without demanding recognition. She hated not understanding people, and Marcus Avery was, to her, a walking contradiction. The next morning, she pulled up his file again. What little there was. 4 years of employment history, just basic janitorial roles. No higher education, no certifications, but there were gaps. Big ones. 8 years completely missing. She leaned back in her chair and whispered, "Who are you really, Marcus?" Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was tying his daughter's sneakers. Ava was 7, sharp-eyed, with a smile that made his whole world slow down. "You fixed computers yesterday?" she asked, brushing crumbs off her dress. "I did," he said with a smile. "Are you going to be a computer guy now?" He gently touched the edge of her cheek, brushing a loose curl back behind her ear. "No matter what I do, I'll always be your guy first." He dropped her off at school and walked back into Edgesphere, the same way he always did, quietly. But nothing was the same anymore. Carla waved at him from across the floor, smiling. Brent didn't make eye contact. Even the receptionist offered him coffee, black, the way he liked it. But Marcus didn't care for attention. What caught his interest, though, was when he passed by the design lab and saw a screen full of incomplete blueprints. Something about the layout caught his attention, something subtle. Misaligned sequencing, poor heat distribution. He tapped gently on the glass. "Your circuit flow's going to choke under load." The young engineer inside blinked. "Sorry, you've routed too many components through the lower loop. It's neat but not efficient. It'll meld under full use." The engineer gave a tight smile. "We're under deadline. No time to rebuild." Marcus didn't argue. He stepped in, studied the screen, and took a pen from the desk. On the corner of a napkin, he redrew the layout. Simpler, tighter, safer. The engineer leaned in slowly, then widened his eyes. "This could work. Would have worked better if you rotated the primary coil," Marcus added. As he left the room, the kid whispered to himself, "Who is this guy?" Later that afternoon, Madeline walked into the lab with a tablet in hand and no assistant trailing her. She motioned Marcus into her office. This time, she didn't sit behind her desk. She leaned against it. Different energy, more personal. "I've had 1,000 employees pass through these halls," she began, "and I've interviewed executives who designed satellites and security systems. But none of them surprised me like you did." Marcus crossed his arms casually. "I'm not trying to surprise anyone." "I know," she said. "That's what bothers me." He raised a brow. She sighed. "You're better than most of the engineers here, and you know it. But you don't want the position, the office, or the title. That kind of person? Dangerous." "Dangerous," he repeated. She nodded. "Because you don't need approval. And people who don't need it, they're not easy to control." Marcus was silent for a while. Then he said something that shifted the room's weight. "I spent a decade building unmanned aircraft to fly into storms and enemy airspace. We call them ghosts. I watched men smarter than me get too proud, too loud. They got promoted. I stayed quiet. You know who made it home?" She swallowed. "You did. I don't need to be in charge to be valuable." Madeline leaned forward. "Then help me." That caught him off guard. "There's something happening in this company," she continued. "I've felt it for months. Quiet pushback. Someone's been rerouting budget streams, altering code, delaying updates without permission. My engineers are too scared to speak up. My VPs, most of them care more about optics than truth. And you think a janitor can find it?" Marcus asked, a slight smile forming. "No," she said. "I think a ghost can." There was a long pause. Then Marcus nodded once. "I'll need full access." "Done. And I'll need my shift to stay the same. I still walk my daughter to school. She smiled for the first time. You've got it. As he turned to leave, she added softly, You were right yesterday. I only saw the uniform. I didn't see the man. Marcus didn't turn around. He just said, Most people don't. But Madeline did now. And that changed everything. It didn't take Marcus long to uncover the cracks. The deeper he dug into the systems, the more signs he found. Hidden routing paths, unauthorized access logs, server mirroring that made it look like everything was fine when it wasn't. Someone wasn't just delaying updates. They were actively manipulating company operations, masking losses, inflating projections. Fraud. It wasn't a rookie mistake. This was clean, careful corruption, done by someone who knew exactly how to cover their tracks. But Marcus? He'd worked on black box systems designed to survive cyber warfare. He didn't need to chase fingerprints. He just followed the shadows. By the end of week 2, he narrowed it down to one person, the chief financial officer, Brad Lorman. Slick, confident, and, for years, untouchable. Marcus waited until the evidence was undeniable. Then he walked into Madeline's office, closed the door, and laid it all out. She didn't speak for a long time after reading it. Her hands trembled slightly. I trusted him. Marcus leaned forward. He counted on that. Madeline stood, crossed to the window, and stared out at the city. If this leaks before I handle it right, we lose everything. Stocks, trust, investors. You won't, Marcus said calmly. You're not alone in this anymore. She turned back to face him. Why are you helping me? He paused, then said quietly, Because when I came here, you didn't know who I was, and you tried to humiliate me anyway. But instead of doubling down, you listened. You saw past what you assumed. That's rare. She nodded slowly, her voice soft. And I saw a man who reminded me what leadership actually looks like. The next morning, the company board was called in for an emergency meeting. Marcus stood beside Madeline as she presented the findings. Brad denied everything, at first, until the video footage showed him logging into hidden accounts, until the audit logs matched his employee ID, until the firewall patch Marcus had coded to record hidden packets revealed encrypted data rerouted into a shell company. The room went dead silent. Then the CFO stood up, looked Marcus dead in the eye, and spat out, You're just a janitor. Marcus didn't blink. And you just fired. Security escorted Brad out that morning. Madeline didn't celebrate. She didn't smile or gloat. Instead, she stood in front of her team hours later, looked around the room, and said, From today forward, every employee's voice matters. Every position, every floor, every badge color. We don't wait until disaster to recognize worth. Then she looked at Marcus, who stood in the back of the room, his mop leaning beside him like always. I once judged someone by the uniform they wore. I won't make that mistake again. There was quiet applause. Then, a standing ovation. But Marcus didn't step forward. He just walked back to the janitor's closet. Later that evening, Madeline caught him packing up. You could stay, she said. He smiled. I'm staying. I just don't need the title. You want to mop floors after taking down corporate fraud? I want to be home at 3:30 to make grilled cheese for my daughter and help her with her math homework. She exhaled slowly, a smile growing despite herself. You know, there's something about you, Marcus Avery. Something steady, solid. He turned toward her as he picked up his bag. You don't have to understand me, Madeline. You just have to trust that I'll show up when it matters. And then, as he headed for the elevator, she called out, Marcus. He paused. I hope Ava knows how lucky she is. He looked over his shoulder. She does. But I'm the lucky one. That night, Ava curled beside him on the couch as he read her bedtime story, her tiny hand resting on his forearm, over the faded ink of navy wings, over everything he used to be and still was. And somewhere across the city, a CEO sat alone in her office, finally feeling like, for the first time in a long time, her company was in good hands. Not because of a title, but because of a janitor who reminded her what real strength looks like. Quiet, honest, unshakable, just like Marcus.